Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Season 3 of the Rule 34 podcast. I'm your host, Jack, joined by my fellow guest,
Mr. Solis.
All right, and how are you, sir?
I am doing just fine. Happy August.
Happy August.
We have started, strong start, in my school, which means that we are 1 week away from the kids coming back.
Oh, it is that time of year.
Yes, sir. I was able to take a week off and drive out to Idaho to see my brother, where he's recently moved, and that was a really great drive and a great visit.
Nice. How was it out there?
Hot, and it's charming. It's not city life. When I come back, I stop by Vegas, and there's a big difference between LA and Idaho. There's an infinitely big difference between Vegas and Idaho. But I like our little I like our little slice of heaven out here. My brother is a little more comfortable out there.
Well, that's good to hear that he's getting situated out there.
Yeah, and how have you been, sir?
I've been doing good. A lot has happened on the podcast-wise since you and I last saw each other. We opened up Season 3, and in that time, a new member joined on the Rule 34 podcast with Dom and I to be our fellow co-hosts on there.
I heard about this. Who's joined you?
Giovanni.
Of course.
Yeah. So, as the listeners know, the episode he joined for us, it was funny. So it was our usual Monday recording, and Dom and I had planned to review. I think Post Malone had recently dropped a new album, so we were like, "Hey, let's hop on that, give a review of that album." And he joined us, and he's done it a couple of times where he joins in to listen to us as we're recording the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But as we began to talk about video games before getting into our main topic, he decided to join in. And we got so into that discussion that we had to start, that we were like, okay, we'll see you all Thursday. Because this was before we came up, this was back in Season 2, before we had Season 3 schedule. So we were like, I guess, to give the audience what they came here for, we're going to give you an episode on Thursday where we actually review the album. And he joined again for that. And then once the finale happened and we started planning for Season 3, that's when he told both of us, I want to join full time in a sense. I want to, jump in on this and, jump in on this journey with you guys. And so he's been here for the past couple episodes, just recording with us. It's felt, even though Dom and I, of course, enjoyed each other's company, both of us agreed that, having him there, sharing and offering another different perspective makes it feel more natural, bouncing ideas off the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
All our episodes we've enjoyed recording so far, and he's even helping us try and figure out what type of a visual stance situation for the podcast.
Nice. That sounds great. So tell me, in this new 3-man booth, who's Excalibur, who's Tony Schiavone, and who's Taz?
Man, I think let's see. I think I'd probably be Excalibur because I'm the one that's, the main focus of podcasting. I'm the one trying to help guide things through conversation.
I'll second that.
I think Gio most definitely is Taz in this situation, providing the color commentary, but in the more, how would you say? I remember seeing Taz described what his role is, where he's more on the details but still being color commentary.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Dom for sure is Tony Schiavone, where he's the more refined voice. I
heard Tony Schiavone in a podcast say actually calling baseball is his passion. So I like Dom being this person who joins you in these conversations, but in the background there's something he's even more adept to talk to that you're not going to address at all.
There's a couple of times where he'll hint at something or bring something up, and I just push past it because I'm I am not talking about that on this podcast. And it's funny because on the last episode, I literally said, we were talking about some of our hobbies, and I was telling them about how I love podcasting now because of doing this for all these years. And I was saying to him, I look back at it, and there's so much stuff that I would have never talked about had it not been for this podcast and joining with them. And
Incredible.
Yeah, and definitely Dom, or you know who Dom definitely also could be?
Who?
He could be JR because of the fact that just sometimes he brings up some of the most absurd stuff, and his comedic timing is so good. Because our last episode, we were of course we were talking about our hobbies, and Dom started talking about 3D printing. And we ended up, that's another thing, I started getting back on posting little clips from our episodes for the TikTok and YouTube Shorts section, you know, to draw viewers.
Yeah.
And Dom is always one that, like, he's always in some way or form included in those, because, like, again, like JR, he'll just say something completely funny or random out of nowhere. And he got us with this last episode. We were talking about our hobbies. He's talking about 3D printing, all the stuff that goes into, you know, printing, you know, figures in what he was doing. And then out of nowhere, he just goes, oh yeah, but it's pretty dangerous in the fact that the material I'm using has these dangerous fumes, so I have to make sure everyone gets out the room, because, you know, I don't want people in 10 years coming out and saying they have cancer. And Gio and I just go, we were so shocked. I'm like, is it the material you're using? And Gio just goes, I did not see that coming. And I'm like, that came completely out of left field. Like, he just randomly drops that bomb on us. The 3D printing is so dangerous.
And I'm sure he did it with that straight face of his, right?
Yeah.
Unwavering. His, like, eyebrows don't twitch, and he's, you know, even tone. He's just like, in 10 years, I'm not trying to let anybody tell me they caught cancer from my stuff. And you're like, what? Run that back?
Yeah, exactly. So definitely Dom is JR in the 3-man.
Incredible.
Oh, man. But yeah, it's so fun. And speaking of Dom, as I mentioned to you, and as I've mentioned on the podcast, I've been getting Dom into more wrestling. And this Saturday, WWE Summerslam was held, and he came to join us for that, as we will talk about today. And funny enough, sir, I'm getting back to we're getting back to our mini series on the main line of the podcast about explaining wrestling to Dom, and this is going to be the first episode with Gio there as well, so that's 2 non-wrestling fans, and the one that they want to see the most, because the way we have a Google Sheets of all our ideas, and under the wrestling topics I put stuff, and Dom saw this one, and when we were coming up with our schedule for the coming weeks, he's like, we definitely need to do this one, because I need to know what is the child custody ladder match.
Oh my goodness. It's an anniversary special, given that happened on SummerSlam.
Yeah.
That match was brought up on another podcast I listened to. A listener wrote in and asked, what recent event, what wrestling happening has made the podcasters feel especially old, right?
Uh-huh.
Something like the fact that WrestleMania 40 is like 2 years away.
Oh, yeah.
And one of those guys goes, Dominic Mysterio. Just the existence of Dominic Mysterio. We all saw him. He was a little baby boy with bleached blonde hair looking like Eminem. And now he's a grown man.
That's the part I'm so prepared for, is to tell them this storyline and at the very end go, oh, and did I mention, by the way, he's a wrestler now, wrestling with his dad?
Oh, and by the way, Rhea Ripley is playing mind games, like wearing an Eddie Guerrero shirt to Rey Mysterio's 20th anniversary. Don't tell me, Jack, that WWE doesn't do long-term storytelling. Jack, Triple H takes over in a day, and we're referencing something that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, and that's big news as well. Obviously can't get into the details as to why Mr. McMahon is no longer in power, but he retired through a tweet.
A tweet and a message to the wrestling staff, which is somehow even crazier than the tweet itself. Did you hear it?
I heard like little bits and pieces about it. I don't think I heard like what was fully said.
It's, you know, a really sweet kind of send-off. It's like, it's so casually written, but I get the sense that it actually might even be his voice, right? He's like, I'm retiring at 77. That's old, right? LOL. Puts an LOL in his retirement message to the wrestling staff. But like, it ends in like this mantra that you get the sense is shared amongst them all. He says, you know, keep your chin up and sell, sell, sell. You know what I mean? It's like, guys, still producing TV on his way out. Here's to him. You and me are here because of him too. Yeah. We can't deny that. We also can't deny that a lot of shady stuff have come up in the last couple of weeks, and we wait until all of this blows over. And is it going to be he sneaks out another win like the shady heel persona he is, or is all this going to catch up to old man McMahon? Goodness gracious.
Yeah, but so some crazy stuff, especially leading into SummerSlam. People were kind of expecting change the moment they heard, Triple H is, head of talent relations and creative now. Stephanie and Nick Khan are co-CEOs or COOs, I think. Either one, I forget which exactly is it. But, they're co-owning that part. But as I expected, and as many would report, don't expect too much, because since SummerSlam was already in place, Triple H doesn't want to really alter stuff to the point where the card was set in the eyes of the fans, and now where a ton of things have changed. Like, now the main event is different, now this person's challenging this person instead of this person. Like, the real kind of statement was not only this past Monday Night Raw, apparently that was labeled as a statement show, but the upcoming pay-per-view now that Triple H has full time to fully book it his way, is Clash at the Castle.
Yeah, I feel like more than a few folk think that we'll get this sort of renaissance of NXT. But Triple H was wise enough to know that was catering to a very specific audience, and that Raw and SmackDown, he's gone on record to say, catered to something completely different. So he knows his audience, and, we saw fingerprints all over SummerSlam. That's the things that happen because one guy's out, one guy's in.
Yeah, and especially because Triple H has even, again, gone on the record and said that he didn't think the way he booked NXT would work on the main roster. Mm-hmm. So very similarly, it's like, I get what a lot of people are coming from. A lot of people are just optimistic and hopeful for change, and obviously change will come, and I'm just kind of excited to see at what levels do those changes come.
Goodness gracious, Jack. I think they post Raw and SmackDown the next day on Hulu, and I just might tune in.
Yeah, I heard about Raw being a statement show, and I just remember telling my dad asked me, he's like, are you going to tune in now to see it? And I was like, well, on cable, they don't show it like the way AEW shows it, where they show it like earlier, like West Coast time, they still show it at the 8 o'clock hour, you know? They don't show it at 5 o'clock while it's airing on the East Coast at 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock that time.
You have a solid bedtime, 8 o'clock. You're showered, got your glass of milk, you are tucked in. We have no time for this.
Yeah, I was like, I don't have time to not only stay up till then, but then sit through the 3 hours,
Goodness.
I told my dad, I just take the approach he does, look the next day what the highlights are and pick and choose what I want to watch.
Nice.
But, they've definitely enticed a ton of people, because I think I saw, obviously I'm not one to care much about, ratings, but I think I saw the ratings for Raw was like 2.4 million tuned in for that first hour.
Yeah, word's getting around. Things are a-changing.
Yeah, and, hopefully they can keep the momentum up. But, getting right into it, the show, of course, on topic, 2022 SummerSlam. I don't think I caught the pre-show, but I'm pretty sure there was no matches on the pre-show.
I watched the pre-show. My dad joined me for the first part of the show. It's so funny, like, he was flabbergasted at the idea that the thing was going to start at 5 but end at like 8 or 8:30. So we watched the pre-show. He got caught up on the matches going on, but it was all just video packages.
Yeah, but so we start off the show, and we started off with the Raw Women's Championship. Bianca Belair champion defending against challenger Becky Lynch. And what were your expectations going into this match, sir? Because I know quite a few people had their own interesting fantasy bookings for this match.
I just wanted to be done. This is a year since they first encountered each other upon Becky's return from maternity leave in that squash match that shook the world, right?
Yeah.
Bianca got her win back at WrestleMania. They do it again at WrestleMania Backlash. And Becky's been on this tour of the force of getting back, right? So I don't want her to get back. I want Bianca to win definitively, and we move on to a new story. That was my expectation. How about yours?
I was very similar in the fact that I wanted it to be done with. It's not that they don't put on good matches. Obviously, I loved all the matches that they've had so far, like when given time. But like it's finally a full calendar year since the feud started. And while I do love long-term booking and all that and long-term storytelling, it's like it definitely reached its like peak and definitive end at WrestleMania, and everything after was like the epilogue of the story.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so I'm also looking too for like any way that this match is different from their previous matches. So when they go outside and they're in the timekeepers area, I'm intrigued. Yeah, devastating leg drop out there. We see a KOD outside, right? That was pretty intense.
Many people, their expectations that I saw was they expected the reverse of what happened last year, where this time Bianca would beat Becky in 26 seconds here at this SummerSlam.
That's a funny thing that could have happened. Anything can happen in wrestling, right?
Yeah, but given what happens after the fact, it's definitely better that they went with the route that they did, even though there was an untimely injury, which I didn't even notice until the night after that, Lynch came out and cut a promo. I did not notice when she got injured.
No, I didn't notice it all either. They did so much, There was a Spanish fly.
Yeah.
Off the second turnbuckle. There was, let's see, something off the top rope, right?
Who? I'm trying to remember.
I know. Oh, Becky's just pulling that hair, right?
Yeah.
Pulling it across the turnbuckles and pulling it. She's on the top rope. She's pulling her hair. I think she pulls her down, gets her in a manhandle slam.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, that was real good. Bianca was obviously showing off her athleticism. I think especially because he hasn't seen the previous matches, this was the one that definitely had Dom's interest the most until, of course, the main event. We'll get into that. But, this one, because ever since I showed him the attires and now he's seen Bianca wrestle, he's definitely, most intrigued with her because he sees, this super athletic style that she has, pulling off some of these moves that, you wouldn't expect, I guess, a woman of her size to pull off.
And Bianca was the hometown hero. She's from Tennessee. So the crowd was behind her.
Yeah, that was another thing I explained to him, too, because he was like, oh, we're in Tennessee tonight. I'm like, yeah, they're in Tennessee. They're in the stadium where the Titans play. And, obviously explaining to him the stuff like, normally they run shows in arenas, but for the Big Four, they try and go stadium, or at least SummerSlam and WrestleMania, they try and go stadium size. And, he was definitely impressed by just the sheer size of that crowd.
Yeah, 48,000 strong. Which will be announced later by Knox County, Tennessee Mayor Glenn Jacobs.
Yeah, and then of course we get the finish where they hit the Spanish fly, and then Bianca uses the KOD on Lynch to get the pinfall, and that's the end of the match, right, sir?
Well, before we wrap things up, a really sweet moment. Becky's been a big old nasty heel, trying to get back to the top of the mountain, and we see a different side of her, Jack. I think she's already nursing that arm, but she sticks her hands out for a handshake. And you got to think, Jack, in professional wrestling, do you go for that handshake? Goodness. Yeah. It's a real crapshoot. Our hero does, and they share a little hug. There's a sign of respect.
Yeah, and it's funny how you said, that when they shake the hands, do you shake a hand in wrestling? Dom sees Becky extend her hand out to Bianca, and he goes, "What is this? Is this a roux?" Are you recording? Yeah, he was very weary, which is funny because he's not even a wrestling fan, but he knows to like.
But he's a suspicious cat.
Yeah,
He's like, this isn't on the up and up.
Just came back from work. Just wanted to say hi.
Howdy, Marco. Good to see you.
Good to see you. You know, I always got to come in talk about Damian Priest before I leave, but you know, I'll let you have this one because I'm kind of tired anyway. But Damian Priest, anyways.
He's coming up later.
But I just find it so funny that like even despite not being a wrestling fan, he's picking up on those things to be aware of. Like I wouldn't trust that if I was them,
But luckily for Dom and us, Jack, we get a handshake. We cut to a video package. We're done, right?
Oh, we're most definitely done, right? Except someone's music hits.
Oh, whose music is that?
The returning Bailey.
Whoa!
After almost being out for a year, she returns, and she returns with the woman she was feuding with last when she went out with injury.
Wow! To rekindle that, stake her claim for the championship. Surely she's on her own.
Yeah, surely. Until we hear music that we haven't heard in a while, because this certain person got released last we heard. Yeah, they got released because they were on their way out anyways. We see...
Who's that? It's Dakota Kai! With her two-tone hair and her tore-up pants.
Yeah. Very surprising, but, you know, we heard that, like a week or two before SummerSlam, that, a bunch of talent, when interviewed, they said, you know, obviously most of them were unnamed, but a lot of them said, hey, they would have likely still been with the company, whether they were released or left on their own terms. You know, they would have been there had Triple H been in power. Here's a wrestler showing that, you know, they're coming back and trusting in him as head of creative and talent.
And so Bailey's there, Dakota Kai's there, and who's that? Another theme song. What's happening, Jack? Bianca Belair's pace, by the way, throughout this whole thing is priceless. She is just flummoxed.
Yeah,
flabbergasted.
She truly sold, like, you know, these being a big deal with her facial expressions, especially the next person. The moment their music hits, she has that oh crap face. Like, I've dealt with this person before. I know what it's gonna be like. It is the call-up of NXT, former NXT Women's Champion Io Shirai, now known as Io Sky.
The genius of the sky, Io Sky.
Yeah. And it is at this point I started freaking out. Dom was asking what's happening, and all I did was run out the room that we were watching and saying, I gotta go get my dad.
That's really funny. Meanwhile, over in Linwood, I'm texting my buddy who's watching at home on Peacock. We talked about him during Money in the Bank, and I said, hey man, Triple H took over. There's gonna be a whole lot of people you never heard of on this show. Get Google ready.
Yeah, but very, very exciting to see this. But also, like, the main thing that was running through my mind was, kind of like an odd pairing a bit, you know, of Io and Dakota with Bailey, especially because
yes. It makes about as much sense, sir, if you'll cast your mind to 10 years ago. Makes about as much sense as Becky, Charlotte, and Paige.
True.
You know, you had those trios. You had Naomi, Sasha Banks, and Tamina.
Yeah.
And you got this trio, and what's exciting for me was each of them had their own theme song. They didn't, mash them up into one. So, like, they're already telegraphing, hey, these are stars that you're going to really count on seeing as individual stars down the line.
And I think another thing, too, is that all three women have sort of, like, a different style to them. You know, like, Io has... obviously the genius of the sky, she has that high-flying style to her, that more, style that she's learned through, wrestling throughout Japan, the U.S., Mexico. You have Dakota Kai and her more, like, striker style, and then Bailey with her style, Very interesting to see, rather than it... Well, it's going to be interesting to see, especially if they do tag matches within, like, the different members of that group to see how they play off one another.
Yeah, and you've also got Dakota Kai and Io Shirai, who, maybe struggle in the talking department with one of the best talkers there is.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing to see. And plus, to me, it's just really unique because, like I said, I wouldn't have expected, I know a lot of people wouldn't have expected to see this trio. And, it's unique in the sense of like, the way most people were just thinking was, they would have just had the three of them, Bailey return and Dakota and Io be on their own. Some people even wanting, to go like how they did with Kyrie and Asuka, pair up Io and Asuka to start her off on the main roster just so she can get familiarized. But this is a unique way to start it off, and it made all three really look like a big deal.
Yep.
Especially because the next night on Raw, what's Io's first match on the main roster? Going against the champ in a match.
Ooh, how'd that go?
They actually got a good amount of time before it obviously got interrupted by Bailey and Dakota before.
Of course it did. Curse them.
Yeah, that's the one thing that don't expect to disappear is all the disqualifications.
Yeah.
But that gets interrupted, and then we get the face off of Io, Dakota, and Bailey against Bianca, Alexa Bliss, and Asuka.
Ah, the old guard and the new.
Yeah, so very interesting to see. Gonna be interesting to see where this all goes.
So get this, right? Vince McMahon, notorious for not sort of really strategically booking the women's division, In one night, one match, you just name 6 women to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And not only that, we know he never really utilized the factions much, and here's a brand new one. Because,
Heck yeah.
It's real interesting to see,
Hey, before we move on to the next match, let's name Bailey's faction. They didn't name them, right?
I don't think they've officially named them, but Bailey seems to be hinting that the name is Control. Yeah.
Nah. I'd call them Bailey buddies. Bailey and her Bailey buddies.
Oh, man. And the interesting thing is, as you mentioned, the booking of the women's division, it's like there's a numerous amount of routes they can go. They can prolong the Bailey versus Bianca championship match by, having Io or Dakota fight her at the next pay-per-view rather than immediately throwing Bailey into it and taking a loss.
I'm just saying.
So there's a lot of interesting ways to go. And speaking of interesting, our next match with a very interesting participant because he is recently signed to the WWE, even though he did have a match at WrestleMania. We have Logan Paul versus The Miz.
I kept teasing my 10-year-old niece. I said, hey, your favorite Instagrammer, YouTuber, TikToker, I don't know what he is, on TV. And she's, ignoring me the entire time.
Oh, man. This was definitely, again, another match that piqued Dom's interest because he was like, he knows about Logan Paul since his early days, so seeing him on a wrestling channel is very absurd to him.
Oh, I can only imagine. What time traveler stepped on what butterfly to cause this to happen?
Oh,
hey,
man.
Miz is also flanked by his lovely wife, Maurice, and Ciampa.
Yeah, and not only that, he's in matching gear with Miz and Maurice.
Yep.
Very funny, but yeah, it was funny because Dom kind of, didn't have expectations, so he asked my dad and I, and we were like, well, we'll see, because, before when you knew a celebrity was coming to WWE, you just knew what you were getting. A tag match, they would tag in, throw a punch, and get the pin, and that was pretty much it. But recently, celebrities have actually been training, such as Bad Bunny, Pat McAfee, and such of the likes. They trained ahead of their time.
How about NBA superstar Dwight Howard showing up to that tryout in Nashville?
Yeah, my dad was shocked by that one when I told him that Dwight Howard said he wants to make the transition now. And, that's the difference. They're not showing up and just doing what they want. They're putting into training at that performance center. So we told Dom, as far as expectations, we can't really tell you what to expect because it's always different. It depends on how much training they've put in. And while he obviously needs work, the man definitely showcased that he definitely put in some training because some of these moves, you were just like, back in our day, not to sound old because I'm pretty young, but back in my day watching those celebrities that would come in, they couldn't even, run the ropes.
Oh, yes, indeed. What the move stood out to you in this match?
the moonsault that he hit. Well, obviously it's a big spot, obviously, but the fact that he hit that frog splash from the top rope to the announce table was pretty shocking, because my dad immediately told Dom, because he saw it too. There was even a point where he adjusted himself like midair to perfectly land, and my dad was like, he was saying, Dom, almost in a sense hyping up Logan Paul, like that you can tell this guy was putting in the work, because the fact that he even made that adjustment shows that he's been practicing that and the athleticism that it takes to do that.
Absolutely, I second everything you said, but you know what I couldn't ignore? My guy was gassed out real quick. He's glistening, Jack. He's sweating so much because you compare him to The Miz, and The Miz was bone dry.
Yeah, I think definitely that's another thing, and I think we'll see that with another, quote unquote celebrity.
Of course,
that he got gas as well, but I think that's something that's similar. Like similarly, I gave advice to Gio when he was talking about some of the things he wanted to like fix up after listening back to the podcast. His own criticism of his own podcasting work.
Nice.
The advice I gave him was, to obviously apply it, but to not be too hard on himself, because you only get better with time. And similarly, I don't think anything can prepare you for a wrestling match except just continuing more and more and getting that experience.
Agreed.
What else happened in this match? Oh, there's obviously the point where Ciampa tries to interfere. The ref tries to kick him out, and Ciampa just goes, "No, I'm not leaving." I think that's the first time, at least that I can recall, someone just completely ignoring the ref kicking them out, where you see most of them throw a fit about not wanting to leave, and they leave anyways. Ciampa's just like, "I'm staying here."
It's because I work with teenagers. I absolutely hated this response. The referee's like, "Go to the back," and he goes, "I'm gonna sit in this chair." Like there was we were having a discussion, like a compromise. Like, no. Let me sit in this chair. I promise I'll be good. Right? I was like, what? Oh, I loved Ciampa, but I hated Ciampa. But of course, we just setting up somebody else, aren't we?
Yeah. Whose music hits but AJ Styles? And
music hits, but he doesn't come out from the Tron.
Yeah, we're looking at that entrance rap. Nothing. Until the camera cuts back, and here he is jumping out the crowd onto Ciampa.
Yep. I think continuing a feud that may have started on.
Yeah, I think it started on Raw, like leading up to this Logan Paul feud. They slowly inserted the Ciampa and AJ Styles feud into that.
Yeah, I'm sure Ciampa jumped him or something. So we've got our man Triple H who can remember from one week to the next what we've done. So we've got some continuity going on. By the way, an absolute travesty that AJ Styles is not on this card and they're in Tennessee. Yeah. It's like, he is that Bible belt.
Man, but so that gets Ciampa out of there, but still got Maurice to deal with as she tries distracting the ref. And the Miz thinks that's enough, so he tries to go hit Logan Paul. Logan Paul ducks. Miz almost hits Maurice, backs up, and gets hit with his own finisher by Logan Paul to secure the win.
Wow.
Talk about insult to injury.
I thought Logan Paul was going to take the L here. I thought we were going to build him up as a sympathetic babyface who's got a lot to learn. But no, he's coming up, with the big old W.
Yeah. Beating and it's funny because in the promo package, they literally hyped him up, beating the 2-time Grand Slam champion.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Dom later asked for an explanation, and my dad just kind of goes, "Yeah, he's a 2-time Grand Slam champion, but he's not like one of those guys that would win the world title multiple times. He's had his 2 runs, and the one of those runs was a transitional champ to get it from one guy to the other, so that the previous champ."
Where's Ciampa so that I can get him breathing down your neck? How dare you try to undermine that man's successes in the world of professional wrestling? I love Ciampa's promos on The Miz that I think have been relegated to like YouTube and Instagram. But I love those promos where he's talking John Logan Paul about how dare you step to The Miz. This is a man who's beaten John Cena in the main event of WrestleMania. And you're like, Ciampa is the man.
Yeah.
Ciampa is talking people into the building. And The Miz, the man with the gift of gab, just stands there with his raised eyebrows behind his sunglasses going, that was good.
Yeah. I mean, as my dad told him, though, props to The Miz because, he understands his role and he's helping getting over a lot of different guys. This
is absolutely true.
Yeah. The one thing I definitely forgot to mention to Dom is just how reliable he was in the sense of that guy was never injured up until last year.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. But speaking of Ciampa, he has a match next week against the champion of the following match, which kind of spoils the ending, but it was already, or it wasn't set in stone, but a lot of people expected it. But the next match, United States champion Bobby Lashley going up against former champ Theory.
Took the title from him last month. Would Theory be able to take it back?
Yeah, and would he be able to take it back and then cash in later to become a triple champion?
Goodness gracious. I don't think the guy's big enough to hold all that gold. He's so kind of tiny.
Yeah, it was funny because Dom sees him coming out and then he just goes, I mean to ask, why is his name just Theory? Does he have a first name? And I go, yeah, he has a first name, but they usually remove your first name for whatever reason in this company.
Have I ever told you what my theory is about those first names? I think it costs money to trademark names. And I think it costs less money to trademark one name versus two names. And I think that they go out of their way for people that they don't believe in to have them. You know what I mean? Because we never started calling John Cena Cena.
Yeah.
RKO wasn't just branded RKO or just Orton.
Yeah.
Those guys make a bunch of money and they can keep their first name.
Yeah, there's obviously plenty of theories, but yeah, I think it does have to do something because you look at a lot of the people who have lost their first name, Cesaro, Rusev, and you start seeing a pattern.
Yeah, one of the best things that came out of Big E's WWE title run last year was he started to say, on Twitter and in interviews, I want my last name back. I want Langston. I'm like, yes, please.
Man.
Can you imagine if Steve Austin was just called Austin? Stop it.
Yeah.
Speaking of stop it, this match ends pretty quick.
Yeah, Theory tries to walk out on the match and, it's under the guise of he wants to conserve his energy in case he does cash in later in the match. Or later in the night. He
also goes for the attack early in the match with his briefcase. He's got a briefcase. It's the big old, Halliburton.
Yeah.
So going to town on Lashley because he's got a weapon before the bell rings.
Yeah, they start going at it. Lashley had a really cool entrance, with all those fireworks. They really started getting into it, but kind of like the last match. Of course, obviously there was the attacks from before, but Lashley still was pretty dominant after the fact. Very similar to the last match, obviously, where Lashley just dominated him, which you'd expect because, like you mentioned, Theory's not as big of a guy. Well, he's big, but he's not Bobby Lashley big.
No, and we're all going to wait for him to cash in on Bobby Lashley-sized people. Yeah. I don't know, man. I wasn't as excited as some others.
Yeah, and it's funny because I saw people, fantasy booking ahead of time. They were like, oh, Drew beats Roman at Clash of the Castle, and that way it's easier for Theory to cash in on rather than Roman, and I'm just like, you all realize Drew is about the same size as Roman and Brock and Lashley. It still isn't going to be as believable. The only reason people believe it is because Drew, as of late, hasn't been booked to the stature of a Brock or Roman.
When does he come up? Does he come up now or later with his promo? We can talk about that really quick.
I think it was after this match. It was either after or maybe even before, one of the two.
So during the night, he comes out, doesn't have a match. He's in his like jeans, just to say that he's coming after whoever wins the main event at Clash of the Castle in Wales. And I don't know. Again, the old man's out, Triple H is in, and Drew's been booked really gnarly the last couple of months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like weird and he's hard to get behind. He's kind of a jerk, right? Like, pushing around Adam Pearce if he doesn't get his way. You're like, is this an honorable way of getting yourself into Money in the Bank? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he goes out there and in one promo reminds me, oh goodness, he looks and sounds so much like pre-WrestleMania 36 Drew McIntyre, the guy I wanted to beat Brock Lesnar in that empty arena. Goodness.
Yeah, and you mentioned that empty arena. We didn't get to hear the pop from a stadium, but a European crowd pop, if he does win, that will definitely make up for the empty arena 2 years ago.
They know how to cheer and chant.
Yeah, definitely excited for that. But as we mentioned, Lashley returns. Lashley retains, and I think it was kind of evident that there obviously still was going to be a Theory cash-in due to the fact that, yeah, he got beat here, but it wasn't like, he got beat so bad we wouldn't expect him later in the night. But
correct.
Lashley does retain, and as I mentioned, he'll be facing Ciampa next week on Raw. And I don't know if you caught it, but I caught it because people were talking about it. They did a video package hyping up the heritage and legacy of the United States Championship, showing off guys like Dusty Rhodes and John Cena and Eddie Guerrero, and then Bobby Lashley as well, hyping up the United States title.
No, but that sounds incredible.
Yeah, so looks like, they're, of course, new person in charge, start hyping those mid-card titles up, especially, I think them hyping up the mid-card titles signifies that they're truly going to keep it as the undisputed WWE World Championship, whatever it's called. I think they're keeping it as one rather than splitting it, and then going to really start emphasizing these mid-card titles.
Interesting. You ready to make that prediction? I'm gonna write it on my whiteboard.
Let's go. I'll keep that prediction. I'll make that prediction, but I'll still keep my old prediction in case of they do split it of who I think would be those next champions.
Yeah. Jack, keep, and I'm gonna say that they split them up. It may happen after WrestleMania, but I think this time next year we got two champions again. Roman has been beaten by somebody of a formidable foe, and we've carried him out. There are four men, Jack, who have held the title for longer than it was announced during SummerSlam. Do you know who those four men are?
Bruno.
Yeah.
Hogan.
Yes.
No, definitely not Austin. Who is it? Are they counting Flair?
Nope.
It wasn't Flair. Okay. Who else? I'm trying to think. I know they don't count Walter's reign, so who are the other two? Bruno. Who are the other two? I know Bruno and Hogan, but
Bob Backlund.
Ah, okay.
And Pedro Morales.
Oh,
so I think by this time next year, his legacy, right? It's etched in stone. He's done the company the service of carrying it on his mammoth tattooed back for the last 2 years. And we give him his island to retire on for a while. Do the old Brock Lesnar schedule while Cody is running the show.
Yeah, definitely. I seriously cannot wait for Rumble to come around, because I already know they're lying to us about Cody's timeline. He's showing up at Rumble. He's pulling a John